So we're learning the Maimon Minu Melech. We're on page 218. It's in Derech Mitzvosecha Minu Melech. And we're in the middle of the page where the Tzemach Tzedek explains to us, he answers his question, how is it that when the Adam Arishon and Abraham, Yaakov, and Yosef gave away years of their life, it actually took away years of life to make David to live, because he was called Bar Nafla. He was fallen. He was a Nephil. He would have never emerged. So Tzedek asked the question, since we're talking about spiritual powers, spiritual energy, it's like taking from one candle to another candle. When you light one candle from another candle, nothing's missing the first candle. And yesterday you began the explanation to say that's true if things are be'erech. Be'erech means there's an association. Like I told you, one is 1 out of 1 trillion. To say that 1 out of 1 trillion is bli gvul, there is an atom finite difference, it's wrong. It's a gvul difference. It's a limited difference, a major one. But how do you have 1 trillion from many ones? That means 1 is a player. It's a small player, but it's still a player. In order to get to something that is beyond, transcendent, or in Hebrew, shelo be'erech, you need to remove yourself completely from the first position. Otherwise, there's always a remnant of the past that's there, and that doesn't allow for a complete change. And just to add to something that we didn't discuss yesterday, and we just mentioned it briefly, this is true also in what psychology calls the paradigm shift. You have to change your entire outlook. Now, people say, well, people don't change. People are people at the age of 80, at the way they were 20. Even if that's true, psychologically, that's not what we're discussing. What we're discussing is when you make a complete break and you forget about the past and you move on. But you have to make a complete break. If you don't make a complete break, you're not really going to ever move on in a way that you want to move on. And this is true from religion to practical behavior in all aspects. And it's not easy. This is not easy. And it doesn't mean you have to move on, by the way, with some of the ways that people are doing it today, which is very wrong, where people are bad-mouthing their parents, their rabbis. There's a whole movement of, the vulnerability movement. I'll coin that phrase. This has crept into the main speakers in many communities, in Chabad included, where the more vulnerable you are, and you say that you're vulnerable, the more you're accepted. To me, that is, hogwash, nonsense, and wrong. Because, first of all, if you want to be vulnerable, don't tell us you're vulnerable, just be vulnerable. Number 2, did you check with the Torah? Maybe there's certain things you're not allowed to be vulnerable in public, like embarrassing your father or your mother or your rabbi or your wife. Now, there are times you're allowed to. We spoke about it. If there's abuse, there's exceptions to a rule, where Jewish law, halacha, says so. But normally, this whole approach, I'm thinking a lot about this these days because it's now, rampant in the podcasts. I mean, if you listen to many podcasts, I'm telling you, and this is throughout, whether it's the Sfardim, Ashkenazim, the Hasidim, Chabad, I'm telling you, this is a culture that's been created. And I live in this culture, but yet I come from a different culture, a different background, and a different time period. And I understand what the culture wants, but there's a halacha. There's Torah. We, as frum Yidden, we follow the Torah, not our whims. And if the Torah says this is not the way to do it, you're not allowed to do it, you're not allowed to do it. Whether you understand, you don't understand, that's what a frum Jew is. He listens to Hashem vis-a-vis the Rabbanim and Halacha, right? So why am I saying this? How is this relevant? Because the Rebbe's, the Tzemach Tzedek's talking about here that the reason Adam, Avram, and Yaakov and Yosef had to give from their actual years, give away their years. You understand, Moshe? Adam could have lived 1,000 years. He took 70 years. That's a bulk of time. And he gave it away to another individual, another person, of course, Melech Yisrael, David HaMelech, right? But nevertheless, who of us is going to give away years? I'm not going to give away the years. You know, and if I have to give away years for my Rebbe's health, it takes a lot out. It's a big Mesiras Nefesh, right? So Tzemach Tzedek explains that the only way David could do what he needed to do was if he actually had part of Adam and the rest in a way that it's separated from them, because if it still is attached to them, he can't accomplish what he needs to accomplish. One second, Moshe, one more thought. I always quote the Tehillim, right? Moshe Myers, what does it say in Tehillim? David HaMelech says, L'chu banim, go my children, shimhu li. Where'd you get lost, Moshe? Stay on it. Listen to me, shimhu li. When you want to ask your son, your daughter, your friend, your wife to listen to you, you tell them to go away. You tell them, come here. Boena. And David HaMelech Yoini says just the opposite, seemingly. L'chu, go, my children, go away. Shimon li, listen to me. So the explanation that I heard, and it makes sense. You don't really know if your child is listening to you until you send them away. Because while they're in your home and in your community, you keep an eye on them, and and you criticize them, and you praise them. They're really not. They're not they. They're not independent. They're you. So you really don't know who they are and what they believe in and what they're going to do on their own. When they go away, and they're faithful to you, to your wife, to your parents, to your community, to your rabbis, your family, to your friends, then you know that they're really listening. So what do we understand from this? You have to go away. And it's a Pirkei Avos. And it says, Havagoyle limkom Torah. You have to exile yourself to a place of Torah. You want to experience Torah, you can't experience it in your own 4 cubits. Again, just when I see Yaini, I remind myself of examples of baseball and football and basketball. So it's a bigger deal to win, not in the home field advantage, but by the other team. If you win there, it's a greater feat, because in your own team, they're cheering you on. So these are all examples. Tzemach Tzedek is saying, David HaMelech, in order to do what he needed to do as a king, he needed to get the energy from Avram and Yaakov and Yosef and Adam, and that had to be removed from them. And that's why they actually gave him the actual years. Moshe, now it's your turn. What do you want to say?
I want to know if today, in our day, this concept of can one give over to another from their own reserve spiritual gochos, spiritual abilities?
They can, but they have to be a dugma chaya. They have to be a living example of what they're giving over. In other words, if someone himself is not a spiritual entity, he cannot give it over. He can't give over that level of spirituality that I believe you're referring to. In other words, he cannot take a dead person, David HaMelech was dead, and revive him, and all of a sudden he lives for 70 years. No, that can only be done if you're an Adam, if you're an Avram. And I don't mean to say them as paradigms, such holy people. I mean to say, if you're a Ruchnisdika person, by osmosis, people will pick up on it. I mean, there's no question about it. And then they will want to live more that way and to be more that way. So the answer is yes. I think you're also asking, what I hear in your question is, is this something that is possible today, being that we're not living in 2,000 years ago with the prophets and all that? And the answer is yes. And Moshe, remember, Hashem, like Almin Yisrael, there's a statement, there's a word. Israel is not a widow, Almana. Hashem takes people. He knows, he took away tzaddikim. He took away a generation. He knows that. And yet he says, you're born, I'm born, the next generation. So he plants people now. You got to find them. I think I've said to you, this person, this tzaddik, whatever you call him, the Yanuka, right? I never heard of this guy, and all of a sudden one day he pops up. He pops up. Where did he come from? And again, I'm just saying that there are people that until a certain age, they're quiet, unassuming, and then they shine. And they shine not only because others make them shine, because they really shine. From what I've seen, I haven't met him, but what I see online over the years is that he's an edler person. He seems to be a refined person. And with humility. Remember, my klal that I picked up in Chassidus, and I wish I would live always like it, which is humility. If you got humility, you have everything, and you're holy. If you have no humility, I don't care how much Torah you know, you're not holy. You have a lot of information. So the king, though. What'd you say?
The king, right?
The king.
The king, right?
Yeah, exactly. The king, David HaMelech, was about humility. Well, Noichi, for Avram says, I am dust and ashes. And David HaMelech, so many statements. So anyway, let's go back to the text now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're middle of the page. We're actually like 15 lines from the top or so. The line begins with the words Umuhusa v'atzmusa shebatzilus, and we are at the last three words. Imlo al yedei. Al yedei is an acronym. Imlo al yedei shetated mimkoimo. The only way that atzilus could impact the next worlds, it's if it descends from its place. Eser milas achronis, the 10 latter virtues. Hein yutzvidas datzilis, they are the 10 emanations of the world of Atzilis. V'tislabish beroi shabriya. They invest themselves in what's called the head of the world of creation. She'oz tispashe v'tagia oira, then it will extend itself and it will reach, its energy will reach b'chol oisha oilam, to the entire world of creation. In Cain, he concludes, Behekach, it must be, it's hekrich, it's not possibly, Moshe, it has to be. Shekvar hi mistalekes, that it already removed itself, v'yitzas michlal oilam atzilus, and it's left the general world of Atzilus, Kenal, as you mentioned before, b'moshel and the moshel. V'lochein, hashonim shenitnu Adam Harishon v'Avos l'David HaMachshon, the years that Adam Harishon, first man, and the patriarchs gave to David, nechsru mamish b'shnei chayeim, it actually reduced their own years. Because what they gave over were energies that required a great descent ad infinitum leap from the world of godliness, which we call the world of Atzilus, to the world of creation, which is Bria Yitzir Asiyah. And when the energy descends into the lower world of creation, it must be that they leave Atzilus, and now they're missing from there. Atzilus doesn't have that energy anymore. And that's why we call this act an act of a gift. Life I borrowed from you, nosato loy, you gave to him. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. And he explains, just like someone who gives a present to a friend, when you give the present to your friend, you don't have any longer the present, right? You bought a present for someone. Moshe makes a beautiful mezuzah and gives it a present. He doesn't have that present. He wrote the mezuzah. It was his. It's no longer his. Once you give it away as a gift, right? So the Rebbe says that's why this idea of the energy coming from Atzilus to Bria is like giving a gift. V'hine. The Rebbe now, the Tzemach Tzedek, answers a question. Remember, we mentioned Adam, Avram, Yaakov, and Yosef. Hey, what happened to Yitzchak? You forgot about old Papa Yitzchak? Where is Yitzchak in the equation? Says the Tzemach Tzedek further, V'hine Yitzchak le'nosim leDavid klum. Yitzchak gave nothing to David. V'hatam, the reason is, Lefi shemadregosai hudin. Yitzchak represents judgment. And dread and the fear of Yitzchak I had. Here, this is unbelievable. King David didn't need to receive from Yitzchak judgment. Because even without getting it from Yitzchak, the rule of the land is the rule. He's a king. If he's a king, he has judgment too. Law and order. So why does he have to accept, why does he have to receive more judgment from Yitzchak, who represents Gevura, if David himself is Dina de Malchus Dina? As it says, a king, through his judgment, will set the earth, will set the law, will make it Ella. Sheyitzchak u'pchinas bezdin ha'elyon v'nikre dina kashya. Yitzchak is called the upper bezdin, and that's also called a harsh judgment. U'malchus, but David HaMelech who bezdin hatachten, is the lower bezdin, v'nikre dina rafya, and is called the soft judgment. V'im kain. David doesn't have to receive anything for Yitzchak because he doesn't want judgment to be augmented. We have enough judgment, right? Rabbanim that are always seeking to be machmer on other people's account. I'll just leave it at that. It's like we have enough. You know, if there's a proper heter, let people breathe. I'm not from those that, that say there shouldn't be chumras. But there's a concept. Don't bring in too much judgment. I'll tell you a story in a moment. On the contrary, David says, I need more positivity. Guys, you learn this mimer, and it's like, I want it so Kabbalistic and it's so practical. You hear this, what he says now? David is looking for more positivity to give over to the people as the Melech Yisrael. Within law and order, he's looking to create rules that are beneficial in a positive way for humanity, not in a way to restrict humanity and independence. V'hainu me'avrom. Where does David get that? From Avram. We'll stop here, and next week we'll continue to share with Yaakov. But the story I wanted to tell you and to conclude, listen to this. This reminds me. So, the one in charge for years of the Chevra Kadisha in Crown Heights was one of my Rosh Hashivas, one of my Rebbes, Rabbi Yitzchok Ushpal. He was from Kurnitz, outside, I think, of Vilna, somewhere around there, and he was a massive Talmud Chochem and a smart Jew and a very fine person, very refined person. Anyway, so he once wrote to the Rebbe, and we have actually, you hear this? We have actually the question and the answer in writing. So, and I believe I might have even I did put it into one of my books. So he writes to the Rebbe, he writes, Lula de Mistafina. Lula de Mistafina is Aramaic. It means if I wouldn't be scared. Lula means if not. Mistafina is scared, but it's not Hebrew, it's Aramaic. And it's language used, either the Gemara and Madrashim, it's language used. And it's a very kind of, I don't know if it was poetic, but it's a very rich language. Lula de Mistafina. It's like, if I wasn't scared of Hashem or someone else, I would implement that men and women, that women should not come to a funeral. Now, do you know that by the Hungarians, women don't come to a funeral? Right here, Williamsburg, Borough Park.
Yerushalayim also.
Yerushalayim. Okay. Now, whether it's mitzat tznius, whether it's because of Kabbalistic reasons, whatever, so he writes to the Rebbe, and again, I don't know why he wrote it, what happened, I don't know. And I don't remember now what year he wrote it, but I don't think it was in the early years, probably it was in the 70s, because he passed on in mid-80s. Anyway, so he writes to the Rebbe, but I don't have the broad shoulders to do that. He's the head of Chevra Kadisha for Chabad, and he can easily give out an edict that women are not to go anymore to funerals. But he writes to the Rebbe, I don't have the guts to do this, and therefore I'm asking the Rebbe, what does he think? Interesting question, right? And the Rebbe answers him, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the words, I wish I would, I don't remember the words, but basically the Rebbe answers him, enough with bringing these type of Hungarian chumras into Chabad. And basically the Rebbe says, I'm not agreeing to it. The Rebbe didn't say more, why, what, but he did say, paraphrasing these words. So I think about it, the Rebbe was so frum and so strict, but yet in certain things you see kind of an open-mindedness, taking into consideration the humanity. A woman, a mother, a wife, a daughter wants to participate in the passing of a loved one, and you're not letting them come. Right? We're not saying it shouldn't be tznius. And again, if the minig Yerushalayim, that's the minig, kol hakavod, but that's not Chabad minig. Now, if Chabad and Yerushalayim follows minig Yerushalayim, which probably they do, so be it. But he's asking for Crown Heights, about establishing. The Rebbe says, no, those are chumras that the Hungarians do, and God bless them, and the Rebbe is not poo-pooing them, chas v'sholom. He's just saying, it's not our way. I want you to remember that, because these things that I'm sharing with you, this open up to understand how the Rebbe wants his Hasidim for sure to behave, and to know what's what, Just this morning I heard someone coming home driving on the Spotify, that when they made Sivas Hashem, when they made the organization, the Army of Hashem, 1980, they wanted to make two separate divisions for boys and girls, and the Rebbe didn't let. That doesn't mean to say that there wasn't a mechitza when they had a rally in 770. There was. But I'm just saying, you have to really hone in. Again, this is Lubavitch. This is the Rebbe, And I'm making it clear. With the Lag BaOmer parades, now in Yerushalayim in the Kikar Shabbos, they don't let women come. You know that, right? Because Chabad wanted, but the rabbinate there overruled them, and it's their domain. They are the bulk of the people. They make the decisions there, whether it's the batats or whatever else. I don't say, but for ourselves, we have to know, what's a chumrah. So going back to the Maimer, Tzemach Tzedek is saying, David didn't want more chumras. He himself is a judge. He's not a judge, he's a king. He makes law and order. So why should I take from Yitzchak, which Yitzchak's judgment was more holy in a sense, but more judgmental. The wrong word. More disciplinary. And David is looking to make law and order in a way that people feel good about it. And this is a fantastic lesson for leadership. And especially with the two Gaboyim here, there needs to be law and order, but in a way that's what we call in halacha merutza lekahol, favorable to the congregation. And I could say, knowing your Rav Shapira, he's that type of individual. I've seen it. Here he is, the Rav, the Rebbe of the community with that, right? And he can kind of make any edict and rule he wants, And I see how he works with the people. And he doesn't, Moshe, am I wrong? He doesn't impose, he doesn't seem to impose.
You're right.
What?
You're correct.
Right.
You're correct.
And that's why people love him. And that's one of the reasons. Can you find there's some people that are greater Talmidei Chachamim? Yeah, for sure. But that's not the point. This person, I was in shul sometimes, there's Shabbos, and he's sitting in the back row where I sat, because I don't want to be seen and be heard, just let me daven, and who parks himself next to me? The Rav. And I said, I didn't say anything to him, but I was saying to myself, Rav, Rabbi, your seat's up in the front. What are you doing in the back? You know why he parks himself in the back? Not the whole time, then he goes back to his place, because he wants to acknowledge people as they come in. Tremendous. I learned so much just in that short time observing excellent mitos and understanding of people. I saw him at Shalashudas, and I saw, he gave room for people. He didn't say, "Oh, you can't speak and you can't give a drasha." He had Rabbi Stearns, speak many times when I was there. He has a captivated audience. Okay, he doesn't speak English as well as we know that, but that's not the point. He can, how many rabbis hog the situation, and they don't let anyone else speak. They're the rabbi, they're the Rav, they want to control. David HaMelech was looking as the king to make it easier for people, to make people more comfortable. So therefore he says, please, I don't want any years from Yitzchak. I want Avram. Avram is chesed. Avram is kindness. Give me more kindness. And Avram gives it to him. Now, again, don't get me wrong. Yitzchak is holy of holies. But it's a different energy. It's a different energy. And I think it's very important as we conclude this year to think about this. Let's say a mother and a father, parents. Different people. Different children relate differently to the parents. One more to the father, one more to the mother. And I contend that's not bad. I think that's healthy. Because children are different, and each one has to find the sympathetic ear. It's my mother. No, it's my father. And if you can, and if the parents understand this and they give room for this, then you have healthier kids. Then you have, more success. And we know some boys, they'll spill the beans and pour their heart out to a father and not a mother. And others will do it to the mother and not the father. Should you feel bad? No. Each one has personality, and people, even kids relate a certain way to a father or a mother. This, unfortunately, this becomes sometimes a vicious game where they play one against the other, especially if it's a divorce and things like that. But we're not going to that area. We're talking about in a healthy relationship. If a parent realizes their weakness and their spouse's strength, and therefore they see one of their kids in a certain style who would benefit more from their spouse, not from them, and they push that way and they encourage them to do that, that's a greater win for the spouse that doesn't have that strength. When you're able to realize your shortcoming in this area, and your spouse is stronger in that area, and you give that over to your spouse, you score more points. First of all, the son, the daughter realize, look at my father, look at my mother. They're able to realize, that they don't have this or not as strong, and they're willing to give it over to a spouse. And there's no jealousy. And when there is, it's a problem, a big problem. Rabbi Yoel tells us, my Mashpia, Rabbi Yoel Khan, I remember he told me that in Tel Aviv, there was a known chassid, there was a great thinker of Chassidus, Rabbi Moshe Garari, from the Chabad Garari family. The Mashpia in the yeshiva was Rabbi Shoel Brook, another Chabadman, and he was a great scholar. But in Chassidus, Rabbi Moshe Garari was greater. Rabbi Shoel Brook asked Moshe Garari to teach Rabbi Yoel and some of the boys Chassidus 2-3 times a week, because he knew that these boys need that type of teacher. And Rabbi Yoel told me, he didn't flinch an eye, that he's the head honcho in the yeshiva in Tel Aviv. He's the Rosh Yeshiva. He's giving away his students to someone who's not even the yeshiva. He was in the business world, but his knowledge of Chassidus was tremendous, and he was a Chassidic Jew. So Rabbi Yoel, I remember, he always told us how he was amazed how his own Rosh Yeshiva, who was a special Yid in his own, was able and willing and wanted on his own. This didn't come from the students. This came from Rabbi Shoel Brook. He realized that he cannot give the boys in Chassidus what this other Rabbi Moshe can, and therefore he went to Rabbi Moshe and he set it up, and they learned Chassidus by him 2-3 times a week. I wish there would be more of that today, because people are just like hogging. Don't go there, stay here. You know this. Chevra, we had a mini farbrengen. It's Shabbos Mevorchim of. So Hashem himself, the Father, blesses this month. We should all think about this. Menachem of is not a negative month, it's positive, because it's the only month where the Father blesses us. And that's what we need to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Mashiach should come in Yirtzeh Hashem. Sei gesund, good Shabbos, everyone. See you on Monday. Shalom. Bye-bye.